In this section, we're going to be talking about the purchasing process. So this is part 1, and so we're only going to cover a couple of the learning objectives so far, and that's what's going to be the objectives of purchasing, which you're going to see again and again throughout this course. And we're going to talk about the objectives of purchasing in the context of each of the topics we'll be covering. So this is the introduction to it. Then we're going to talk about the main steps of the purchasing process. So get right into it. What we're looking at here is a slide you're going to see so many times. In fact, I tell all my students, commit this to memory. Write it down. Please, just have these in your mind as we're talking about each topic. So the first priority is we want to make sure our purchasing process and our purchasing strategy align with the organization's overall strategy. Now, we've talked about this in the context of supply chain management, but doesn't it make sense that every function of the business, and purchasing is a function, should align their goals to the overall goals of the organization? Absolutely. You don't want to go rogue for any reason. It's not going to help meet the corporate objectives. The second thing is we got to make sure whatever we do, ensure that there is supply continuity. A fancier way of saying, don't run out. So in purchasing, we're going to be concerned with making sure there's enough supply to meet demand. And we need to make adjustments to make sure that the supply continuity remains throughout. And then lastly, how we do the work. Not just why we do the work, but how we do the work must be effective and efficient. So managing this purchasing process, which we're going to talk about here shortly, in a most effective and efficient way. So continuous improvement on how we do our jobs. So these are the 3 main objectives of purchasing. Again, you're going to see this again and again. Let's break this down one by one. I talked about alignment of strategy with the organization. Let's break it down a little bit further. We need to understand what our internal and external customers expect from us. Not as purchasing agents, but what do they expect from our suppliers? If those expectations are not communicated, or as we'd say, flowed down to the supply base, we run the risk of not being in alignment, but also not meeting the needs of our end customers. We also need to make sure that our function, the purchasing function goals, are in line with what the stakeholders, a fancy way of saying, customers and interested parties have as far as their metrics. So everyone is marching to a single set of goals to achieve the desired outcome. And then lastly is set standards that make sense for the supply base based on the expectations from internal and external customers. So we did that. We start with understanding, then aligning goals internally, and then communicating that with our supply base. An example of this comes out of my experience in the automotive industry. So our automotive customers expected a certain level of delivery. They wanted at least 95% to 100% on-time delivery at all times. If we had anything but 95% or more as a goal for our supply base, we would be out of alignment. So it's no surprise. We understood what our customers' expectations were. We set those goals for ourselves, and we passed those goals on to our supply base. So we were all marching to the same type of metric. That's one example of many. But this is alignment to organizational strategy. Let's talk about supply continuity. In the context of supply continuity, we're talking about the 6 R's of purchasing. Over the next few weeks, we're going to tackle each one of these. So starting with purchasing at the right quantity, the right quality, or the right stuff, the right time, place, price, and source. So all those R's all have to line in with the definition of purchasing. So week by week, we're going to take each of these topics and explore them in greater depth. But if we meet the expectations of the right quantity, the right quality at the right place, the right time, price, and source, we have actually achieved the goal of supply continuity. So we'll be breaking that down further. And as you can see here, there are reference textbook chapters as match up to the current text in this course, which I hope you have purchased or are renting and you have access to, because we will be using the text in this course. Another aspect of supply continuity we will be discussing in greater detail towards the latter half of the course is talking about how do you develop a supplier. Not only how do you pick them, that right source of the 6 R's, but once they're in your team, you can work through the strategy to help build competitiveness as a supply base and a supply channel. So you need to be able to understand what type of business relationship you wish to have with the supplier in question, and how do you develop them to the fullest potential. So this could be you look at your supply base as an opportunity to grow the business with them or improve the business or even exit. That is an option as well. The last objective of purchasing, which is managing the purchasing process itself. So what is that process? Well, we're going to get into that, but managing that process in question is looking at ways to eliminate unnecessary steps. This should be done in all aspects of our life, in my opinion. Eliminating unnecessary or wasteful steps and processes that help prevent you from getting to where you need to be is essential for continuous improvement. It also includes proper staffing of team members within that purchasing function, making sure that the team members are capable of doing the job, are willing to improve, and what other cultural fit required for the organization. That also can mean development of your team members. And, as a manager of a purchasing team myself, I've spent a number of hours establishing personalized metrics, training programs, growth opportunities, stretch projects, you name it, giving them opportunities to grow in the aspect of staff development. And then lastly, the key is to follow the process of buying, the purchasing process, all the way through. And I say the ending is payment, and that's exactly true. Payment to our suppliers. So let's look at this process. It's 7 steps as outlined in your text. We have the identifying the need all the way through to closing out that order or issuing payment. We're going to spend some time in the coming weeks going through different aspects of this process, but let's just take a moment now and go through what does it mean to say the purchasing process. This is a cycle that is completed multiple times a day on multiple levels of complexity, but also throughout organizations. It involves other parties as well. First is to identify the need. We need something. How do you identify the need? Well, we're going to explore that further. But first, you've got to identify you need something. Then steps 2 and 3 together here is to find sources that could help you accomplish that need and narrow it down and select the correct one. So that's that right source. From there, there's an approval process that's required. Approval to even make a purchase, and then approval to purchase and issue the order. So it's approval to purchase and then actually execute the purchase. Another way of saying it. Once the purchase has been made, the product or services are rendered through a process of receiving the material. This could be physical goods that show up on your receiving dock, or it's, say, you're painting your house. It would be the completion of the painting job. Either way, that order that has been purchased needs to be completed through receipt. From there, we can say, did we achieve the goals established with that purchase? Or is it the right quantity, the right price, the right product, the right level of service, right, so on. We need to measure the performance, and we're going to talk about supplier performance many, many times, but we're going to talk about it here in the process because it's important to do it right after it's completed and give real-time feedback to their suppliers, telling them how they did in meeting their purchase agreement. The supplier will then send an invoice in, and we will go ahead and pay it, and that is closing out the order. From I need something to I've received it, and the supplier has been paid. That is the purchasing process. Now, in my history of being in procurement, things can go wrong, typically because the process hasn't been followed to completion. I make it all the way down to the 5-yard line, as I say, the measuring performance, and forget to pay the supplier on time. didn't close it out on time, didn't finish the process, and then you've got angry suppliers. That's not a good place to be. Now, accounting is obviously involved in that step, but it takes communication. So typically, when something has gone wrong, it's one of these steps that we're stuck in or was skipped. Selecting the right source is skipped, and we just go straight to purchasing from a supplier that really wasn't the best fit. Can cause some problems. In the same way that not identifying that you needed something and not placing the order can also provide issues in supply continuity. So we're going to see this process executed over the next few weeks as we discuss each step and in the context of the 6 R's of purchasing. All right, so that's part 1. Let's make sure we covered everything. We have the objectives of purchasing, which I hope you wrote down. You will see it again, but it doesn't hurt to write it down. Then the main steps within the purchasing process and why we do them. All right, we're going to go on to that second part here shortly, recognizing the rest of the purchasing process and key aspects, and I hope you tune in. If you have any questions, please feel free to get a hold of me. I'd happy to hear from you. Otherwise, have a great day and a great week.